Often when we're considering our layout for our web pages, we want to put elements next to each other like an image next to some text. Let's look at one way of doing that. There are quite a few different approaches. The old school way is by using the float property. So let's implement the float property to arrange an image next to our text content here. So first thing I want to do is actually add an image, and I'm going to go to the appropriate spot in my content to do that, which will be inside my section. And at the moment I'm going to put it above the text copy there, but we'll use the float to get these elements next to each other. I'm going to insert an image by finding an asset in CodePen Photos, and maybe look for something that's appropriate. Maybe this one here. And I'm going to copy the small image tag, and I'll paste that into my code right up the top there. So when it renders, it will be at the top of that text, so in the normal HTML flow. So we've got our image here, and then followed by our H1. That's how it's rendering. So let's use the float property to adjust that. I'll just move that over. And I'm going to target the image and give it a float property by assigning the image a class. And that class could be called anything. I'm going to call mine image float just because that kind of makes sense. This is definitely not a technical term. You could use any name you wanted, but image float seems appropriate to me. So I've applied that class, that label to that image there, and then I'm going to select that in my CSS. So I'll go down to my CSS and select it. So in the CSS, I'm selecting this class, and I'll simply apply the float property and give the float property a value of either left or right. And I'm going to start with left, and I'll show you right. And you can see that straight away those two elements are sitting next to each other. So what the float property does is it takes the selected HTML element out of the flow, out of the normal HTML flow, and then everything else will flow around it. So it is very useful, particularly for this kind of purpose, for getting images to sit next to text. So there are a couple of problems that we can see here. So firstly, our text is a bit too snug up against that image, and the image is, because it's out of the flow, all of these other things are wrapping around it as well. And there is a trick to fixing that up, and we'll get to that. But I might just fix up this margin here, and that's kind of a simple fix. I can go to that class, which is image float, and give my image some margin on the right hand side of the image. Just so we've got some kind of padding or spacing there. So that's looking a bit better. Now we've got to fix up the fact that this image is completely out of the flow, and it's messing up the rest of the messing up the rest of the layout. So we kind of need to create a kind of a break point where that image, where everything gets back into the flow beyond that image. And we do that by creating, or by using the overflow property on a class, or on an element. So what I have to do is give an element a class, and then give it an overflow property with a value of auto. So what I'm going to do, I want this image to sit inside my section tag there, and then for everything else to be below the section tag. So I'm going to give a class to section here, which is going to be called ClearFix. Now this is a common class name to fix up this problem, and it's referred to as the ClearFix hack. So if you Google ClearFix HTML, you'll get plenty of information about this kind of technique of getting things back in line, getting things back into the HTML flow. So I've added the class ClearFix, and I'm going to target ClearFix. Now just a reminder, ClearFix isn't really a technical term, it's just a label that lots of people use. It's kind of a convention. And in there, in the ClearFix, well, the declaration will be overflow, and I'm going to set the overflow to auto, and that hopefully should fix that problem there. Excellent. So we've used the float property to get our text and image side by side, and we've fixed up the that overflow problem by giving our parent HTML element, which is the section, that ClearFix hack, which is to set a declaration of overflow auto. Just before I finish off, we can also set our image to float right, to flip that around, and if I just adjust the margin to the left there, that'll clean that up too. So I could have one class for floating left and one class for floating right if I wanted to alternate that throughout an article, for example.